You wished upon a star.
Now we want you to share with us our latest and greatest dream. Disneyland.
Just go to Action Park. There's no other park like it.
Six Flags Great Adventure. It's not a world away.
Paramount's Kings Island.
We will officially open Universal Studios Florida.
Hello, I'm Michael Eisner.
Now, here is your host.
Hi, and welcome back to the Defunctland Podcast. My name is Kevin Perger. I'm joined today by two very special guests, Stephanie D'Abruzzo and Craig Shemin. How are you two doing today?
Hello.
I'm super excited to have you on. As I talked about beforehand, I'm just huge fans of the both of you. Stephanie, I've loved your puppetry, your work in theater and on screen, and then Craig, again, I didn't realize how much of your work I've actually watched because writers are like the unsung heroes of the industry.
Yeah.
But we're gonna sing you a praise tonight. Because we're going to talk all about the Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss. So if anybody's listening that doesn't know these two, you definitely know their work. Craig was the creator of Lou and Lou, Safety Patrol on Disney Channel. He's written for Courage the Cowardly Dog, Blue's Clues, Dora and Friends, Ooby, and Gulligo Island. And he's the president of the Jim Henson Legacy. Stephanie is an actress and puppeteer known for her work on shows such as Ooby, The Book of Pooh, Sesame Street, musicals such as Avenue Q and the best episode of Scrubs, and much, much more. We're here today to talk about the Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss, the Nickelodeon Seuss-Henson collaboration that ran for 2 seasons in the late 90s. I have these two, wealth of knowledge on everything in the puppetry and TV world, and I'm asking you about the most specific, obscure thing possible.
But I still think that we're pretty obscure. I don't know that we're the most obscure.
Probably in the top 3.
Yeah. Yes. Because
you think Wubbulous World is like not the most obscure?
I don't think it's the most obscure.
Well, we could get more obscure.
Well, no, I think that there are projects that didn't make it past pilot that Craig remembers when he was at Henson that are more obscure. Well, Aliens in the Family, I think, is more obscure.
Which neither of us worked on.
Neither of us worked on it, but it was a network show. It was on ABC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You
haven't heard of it, see?
I know. Well, that
means it's more obscure.
That's an immediate trump card. If I haven't heard of it, I can't
yeah,
speak
exactly.
to it.
Now, Aliens in the Family is basically, it was a Henson-produced show, and the idea was, what if the Brady Bunch had... that half of the Brady Bunch were aliens. If Mike Brady was a human and he married Carol, who was an alien and had alien children,
and it was sort of that follow up to Dinosaurs. So the puppets were the puppet versions, the aliens were the puppets, and it was a very similar sort of feel because Dinosaurs had been such a hit.
I know what I'm doing on the next episode of Defunct TV. I just Googled it. Whoa.
Yeah, there you go. See?
Okay, so yeah, you beat me. That's more obscure. But Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss, I just did this, one of my retrospective history videos on it. It was very difficult to find information. Sometimes I try to do these information-based podcasts before finishing the episode, but in this case, just the way it worked out. So I might actually learn, I'm assuming that I'm going to learn a lot more than what old newspapers could tell me. So maybe if you two could just speak to how you first heard of the show, like the first whisper that there was such a show going on.
Craig can do more than that.
Well, it was, what you talked about was actually fairly accurate. The word came around that the Dr. Seuss Enterprises, which was the entity run by Audrey Geisel and Herb Chayette from his agency, they got word around that they were interested in doing a television series and that they would be accepting proposals. And the Henson sort of ace in the hole was a man named Michael Frith. And Michael had worked for Dr. Seuss. Michael was an editor for the beginner books line at Random House. So he knew and worked with Dr. Seuss for years. And
he wrote the book Because a Bug Went Ka-Choo.
Yeah. So Michael was the vice president of creative services at the time of the Jim Henson Company and my boss. So I was in the group that they sort of asked Michael to put together the proposal that they would take to first to the Seuss organization and then eventually to Nickelodeon. So we gathered around and sort of pitched ideas. We brought in a couple of other people. I think Lou Berger was in on some of those meetings, and Louise Gickow.
Lou Berger was a writer on Sesame Street for a long time. Louise Gickow, longtime writer, worked on.
I think she worked on Between the Lions.
Yes.
And and I think our regular internal team, it was me and Jenny Lupinacci, and I think Jim was in LA at the time.
Jim Lewis
was in LA, and basically tried to figure out what a TV show would be. And at first, the idea was to both adapt the existing Seuss books as well as create new ones. And we created some storylines. We sort of drafted some treatments. Michael created some art. And then they thought what would really sort of seal the deal with the Seuss estate is something that an animated company couldn't do, which was basically create the character in 3 dimensions. So Michael and the Henson Workshop, I think Ed Christie was involved. They built Thidwick the moose first. Mm-hmm. And I think that the logic was, let's start with Thidwick, because if they start with the puppet of the Cat in the Hat, then the Seuss people might get really
nervous.
No, they would just be very hypercritical, because you're starting with like
who's going to voice that character? Who's going to? Yeah, who are you going to give that to?
And so they built Thidwick the Moose. We did a little video where
I was not involved with that.
Yeah, it was just a little video where Thidwick. Basically, I think Michael did voiceover talking about the types of things we would be doing. And then Thidwick essentially walks into the video off the page, against a blue screen. We had the page from the Thidwick book, and then Thidwick the puppet comes in and says some stuff. And that video was sent out there. And I think they also brought the puppet out just to sort of show. And I think that, really succeeded in getting Henson the
bid,
it were. Yeah. But then it was about the next step was to get the Nickelodeon on board. And I think this was all happening around the same time as they were thinking of using the CG backgrounds, the computer generated backgrounds,
which was really unprecedented.
Especially the unique thing that Seuss did was to do the show in real time.
Yeah. Those backgrounds were not done in post. They were done in real time.
They were
every movement
were helped in post.
Right. But every movement, if a CG door opened, there was a guy opening that door on the set live that we would puppeteer to.
And the Henson Creature Shop was working on some technology where they could integrate the control of the CG background with the camera control. So when you could either have the camera pan match the pan of the background, so you can pan. A character could move with the background, or you could lock it down,
right? Or you could move against
it.
You could
pan against it. All of that was being developed. The technology was moving so fast at the time.
This was 1990, end of 1995 that it was being developed, right? Because we started production spring of '96. So in 1995, Craig wrote the Muppet CD-ROM, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it was an amazing, award-winning CD-ROM video game that was going to launch only on Windows 95, which made Craig very nervous because your computer had to have Windows 95 in order to run it, and it was a brand new operating
Windows
system.
Windows 95 had not been released.
So he thought, what's going to happen? So things were happening. Every few months, a new chip would come out.
We actually did at one point have a production hiatus because a new computer had come out
Yeah.
that would make production easier. So we shut down production for a week while they put everything in.
Yeah, it seemed like every 6 months the technology was doubling and tripling what it was capable of doing.
So when they did, at that point, they decided for the pitch to Nickelodeon, they went ahead and built the Cat in the Hat. And they made a video of the Cat in the Hat being built. So all of that pitch to Nickelodeon had Fidwick, it had the Cat in the Hat being built, and then they had a puppeteer in the room during the pitch. And I think it was Marty.
Okay.
The Martin Robinson.
Martin
Robinson, who did the original pitch for the Cat in the Hat. He would go on to come back and do season 2 as the cat. And then I was not at that pitch, but apparently it went well.
Right.
We can only presume.
He said, well, so that there was a section of the video where I said that Herb Scannell said it was the best pitch he had ever seen. And that was not, I didn't just like pull that out of nowhere. That was like a direct quote from either representative or him in a newspaper.
You found that in a newspaper? Okay.
Yeah. It was like a 1997 newspaper,
okay.
96.
Interesting.
So it was like just when the show came out.
Right.
Yeah, I don't doubt it was, because it was, Michael had really put a lot of effort into crafting a pitch, and everything was discussed.
Gorgeous. Those puppets were so beautiful.
The technology. I think what really sold both Seuss and Nickelodeon is that the CG technology, while primitive and in its infancy, would allow all of the Seuss settings to be created. You could actually have, because Michael always pointed out that Seuss created backgrounds and worlds in a way that could not really be built in the real world. There were flying buttresses and angles,
so many curves,
dangling things.
It was very illustrated.
Yeah.
And I think unless you had, that's why I think the animated specials always worked so well. But the later attempts to do the live action stuff to build those physical sets, they always looked a little off. Because, Ted Geisel wasn't an architect. He wasn't. These were truly things that existed in their own world. The other thing was it could allow multiple worlds.
Mm-hmm.
The world could be so much bigger than a single set to have it be animated that way.
Yeah, and so the pitch included all the details about the computer graphics. It had the real puppets in the room. It had video of the puppets. Talked about the types of things, the stories, and I think. Basically, the only change from what we had sort of envisioned as the show is that we were not really allowed to do the original books. We couldn't reenact the actual books. We had access to any of the characters, and we could have new stories that take place with those characters. We could create new characters, but we couldn't touch the original books,
which was probably better anyway.
And I think part of it was that they were were starting to license those out for individual projects.
That's right, because I remember the Cat in the Hat movie got greenlit while we were working on season 1.
Yeah, and then there were a whole lot of little details. Like one of the things that was very important to both Henson and Seuss, I believe, is that the show had to air in prime time, and that was sort of a deal breaker. Nickelodeon did not necessarily want a Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss in prime time, but that's they anticipated it would air. Our air dates were Sunday nights at 8, and then it would air on the Nick Jr. And then the other thing that was sort of ironed out in business affairs, and this is another fun thing when you look at the merchandise,
the little merchandise that there was.
Yeah, they were not allowed to have the Cat in the Hat by himself on anything.
Well, no, any of the characters, because Horton too. Remember that ornament with Horton has a little bird on him.
Yeah.
So you had to have like a little Henson-y, Seussian creature with.
Because I think the distinction
character
was it had to be specifically Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss merchandise, because they were selling licensing rights
There's some really lovely, they're
separately.
right. But there's some really lovely ornaments that came out in 1997. We have the Horton and the Grinch and the Cat in the Hat, and they all have like a little bird or a little mouse.
So and the show got sold, and they started gearing up for it. And at that point, I didn't know if I was going to be working on it because they were bringing in the showrunner, head writer David Stephen Cohen, and he was basically, I met with him. He was told that, I was on staff for the Henson Company at the time. So if he wanted to use me, he could do that without it coming out of his budget. And basically I would get paid only when I wrote scripts. I didn't have to be paid on a weekly salary. So that made it appealing for David to use me. And then while he was filling out his team, they were doing the auditions, I think.
Yeah. So there were 3 executive producers on the show. It was Brian Henson, Michael Frith, and David Stephen Cohen. David Stephen Cohen was new to the Muppet world and to Henson and everything like that.
And he came out of the world of sitcoms. He had worked on Alf and Living Single.
And what was the other one?
Parker Lewis.
Parker Lewis, that's right. So I started, my first day on Sesame Street was November of 1993. So when I auditioned for Seuss in January or February of 1996, I was still relatively new, and it was kind of a big deal that I was asked to audition. I had done some Sesame Street. I had done season 2 of a show called The Puzzle Place. I had replaced someone else on that, but I only did one out of the 3 seasons that they did. I had done a show on the Learning Channel when it was still the Learning Channel. I had done like just little things here and there. So to be asked to audition for a Henson show was a really big deal. And I remember going to this audition and not knowing. So that was where I met David Stephen Cohen. He didn't know me. He had met Craig. Craig and I got married in September of 95. I was going by DeBruzzo. Craig was Craig Shemin. David did not know that we were married. And I think Chris Gifford, the executive at Nickelodeon, who was one of our executives, Chris Gifford and Brown Johnson were our Nickelodeon executives on the show. And Chris did not know. I don't think you had met Gifford yet.
No.
Chris did not know that Craig and I were married.
And all along, I think their goal all along was to create a ensemble of 5 people.
Yeah, who would play all the characters. The new characters and the Seuss characters.
Because all of these decisions were made for budgetary reasons. They wanted to have a 5 people on a salary that could do all of these things. Then occasionally they would bring in a guest star.
Right. And what you have to remember at that time, Muppets Tonight was in production in LA. Sesame Street was in production, and that was still the time when they were shooting 6 months out of the year and doing 120 episodes. So that was a big deal. So they weren't really, I don't remember who else I auditioned with, but I think it was one of the reasons why I was asked to audition is because I wasn't ensconced in any of these other shows. I had only, I had done a smattering of days on Sesame Street at that point. So I went in and I had a really good audition. I felt so good about things, and I got to do it. And I found out that I got the job not long after Craig found out that he was going to be writing on it. And what I'm trying to remember when David realized that he had hired your wife.
I think I told him, because what was interesting is that the other, and the other staff, and the other performers, one of the other performers was Kathy Mullen,
right?
Who's married to Michael
Frith, right? Yeah.
All these puppeteers are married to each other.
Well, no, see, that's the thing.
The puppeteers and the writers.
Right. There are very few puppeteers who are married to other puppeteers, but there are definitely puppeteers who are married to other people in the world.
Because, they spend so much time in the studio, they don't meet anybody else.
Well, again, it's a long story with Craig and me, but Craig was probably one of the few people who understood what I wanted to do with my life. And it really, the only times Craig and I ever worked together on shows were Seuss and Ubi.
And even on Seuss, one of the funny things about it is we shot this in New York. So the studio was a fairly small studio. It didn't have to be big because it was all a blue screen.
Right.
The first season
it was a tiny, very tiny studio.
And it was the Henson studio. It's called Carriage House nowadays. But it's a very small place. The third floor was where the computer-generated people were kept and where they did their advanced work and ran the show during production. And then the second floor was control rooms and tech stuff. So there was no room in the studio for our production office and the writer's office.
Right.
So we, I had my own office at the Henson headquarters, but they decided to rent office space like 3 blocks away from the studio. And they actually rented the office space in a medical building.
Right.
It was a small little medical building. So it actually said, 3rd floor, Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, and that little directory with the little felt letters.
2nd floor, Dr. Goldberg.
Right. Yeah. People thought it was a joke,
funny.
but it was absolutely true.
But and then when our office, we were on that floor, and it had been a dentist's office, so all the offices had sinks in them. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so Craig could be very, very clean. So yeah, so we both got hired to work on this show.
Well, not to backtrack, but how did you? So when did you two were married at the time? So when did you two get married?
Well, we got married in September of 1995. We actually met through mutual Northwestern University friends. Craig and I both went to Northwestern. We were not undergrads together. And we both happened to meet at this very magical, wonderful place. Northwestern has these residential colleges, which are basically these themed, I like to call them co-ed fraternities, that focus on different things. There's an international studies residential college. There's a performing arts residential studies. We lived in the communications residential college. And it really was a co-ed fraternity. It had its own traditions, and it had its own video equipment. So it was a play. And at a time when Craig graduated in 88, I graduated in 93, at a time when you did not have a video studio in your pocket the way you do now. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have a video camera. We could make movies at 3 a.m, and we did. The residents were made up mostly of radio, TV, film majors, but there were also a lot of Medill journalism majors and College of Arts and Science majors and music majors, tech majors, people who are all sort of willing to dive in and make things. We had an indoor radio station. We had a dark room, and we sort of did stuff. And because it was this sort of very fraternal in nature, and at the time there was a housing shortage on campus, Craig lived there for all 4 years of his undergrad experience. I lived there for all 4 years of my undergrad experience. And I met through people who were freshmen when Craig was a senior, were upperclassmen when I came in. So I heard Craig's name before I ever met him. So I started getting interested in puppetry when I was in college. A good mutual friend of ours, told me about Craig and puppet projects that Craig had done in college. Craig dabbled in puppetry for a brief amount of time. I'm glad he stopped. I don't think I could have married a puppeteer. But anyway, Craig came to campus when the Jim Henson The Works book was being published. There was a large Henson exhibit at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and Craig came out to research it. So our mutual friend Chris Araneta said, "Hey, Craig's coming to town. Craig Shemin, you got to meet him. He's a great guy. He works at Henson. You'll love him." I had heard great things about Craig from so many other people that I'd met. So that was the first time we met in 1991, late 1991. And through a very strange series of events, I did a puppetry project that won a student Emmy. Through that, I met, this is a really long story.
She auditioned for the Muppets.
I auditioned for the Muppets through David Rudman, who's a Sesame Street Muppet performer and runs Spiffy Pictures with Adam Rudman, who does Nature Cat on
so
PBS.
When she came to New York for the audition,
that's right. We met, we got together, we hit it off.
Yada, yada,
yada,
yada.
yada, yada. When I graduated from college and came to town for Muppet workshops, he let me stay with him. Yada, yada, yada. We fell in love and we got married. So we had this whole history very separate from Muppets. A lot of people assume we met at Muppets, but it was Northwestern and CRC that brought us together. Thank you for yada yadaing me, and because I was spinning my wheels. It's a story that is very long and very sweet and very fun. But you
that's
only
in the
have,
yada yadas.
That's all in the yada yadas. So we celebrated our first anniversary working on Seuss. At the time, I mean, I think when I auditioned, I think Craig was being talked to about being a writer, but that wasn't a thing yet. So
that's even more coincidental.
Yeah, so like I couldn't even go in and say, "Oh, hey, you talked to my husband. He's gonna be a writer on your show."
No,
like
we weren't worried about conflict of interest because I had no power or authority.
Right.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, what's the joke about who goes to Hollywood and sleeps with the writer? That's yeah.
So
it's not a thing.
So did you two just like? I mean, this of course doesn't happen, but in the fictionalized version, the movie version of this, you would have both gone home and be like, "I just had this great audition. That's so crazy. I just had this great interview. What was it for?" And then you would both say that at the same time.
It wasn't quite that coincidental with the two of us.
There
were rumblings.
It was the same project.
There were rumblings, but it was all sort of like, I don't know if this is going to happen for both of us. And I think by the time we were notified that it was happening, it was within, I feel like, a couple days.
And I was very fortunate because I think the main reason that I got the opportunity to work on the show is that I was not, I didn't cost them anything other than the script fees that they had to pay to anybody.
Yeah, but you were good at what you did.
Yeah, but it was also one of my first big jobs.
It was.
Because
it was your first Writers Guild job, right?
No, I had done Gullah Gullah
Island. Oh, that's right.
Before that.
That's right. So that it probably helped that you were in the guild.
It was my first big Henson job.
Yes.
Because I think this was
you'd done Dog City.
Yeah, I had done Dog City, but
the animated series, which is probably that might be more obscure. The animated Dog City.
But I know about Dog City.
Well, no, you know about the special.
No,
do you know about the Fox Kids series?
Oh,
see,
okay, that's the second time I've been trumped. I've been told that.
Everybody knows about. Well, the people who are quality people know about the Jim Henson Hour Dog City special that won an Emmy for Jim Henson, but fewer people know about the Fox Kids Dog City series that was puppets and animation.
Oh
that
no,
was also shot at the Henson Carriage House.
But I had. This was seen as a very high-profile project.
Yes, it very much was.
I was fortunate, but I think that it was basically our main writing staff was David and Will Ryan. Will was an LA-based voiceover artist and songwriter, and
David knew him well.
David knew him and brought him in to work on this. And then it was me, and then we would bring in other
guest writer, Belinda Ward,
and Karen Greenberg, I think.
Yeah, Sesame writers.
Alan Newworth,
Lou Berger,
Alan Newworth, and Gary Cooper, Lou Berger, and then it was the three of us, David, Will, and I, that
sort of the main.
We're the main core of the writing staff, and so it was a great opportunity. But I know that David was really, he wanted to make things letter perfect.
Yeah.
And I remember him spending like 6 weeks on just the pilot script because he wanted the rhymes to be perfect. He wanted to be worthy of Seuss. And, it was tough to reconcile that against our production schedule, which.
Well, not only that, I mean, you had, I think that David had one idea of what it should be. I think Michael Frith had another idea of what it should be. Brian was not really on site. Mm-hmm. He was in LA working on Muppets Tonight. He did come and direct a couple of episodes, but you had people who it was all done with love, but I think the priorities, Michael's a very visual guy.
It was the whole process was a lesson about trying to figure out how to work within these limitations.
Right.
And the limitations,
show,
we had
small
limitations
budget.
of budget, and also the biggest one is technical.
Right.
Well, I don't know if it's the biggest one, but I remember that the computer had a finite number of polygons
Yes.
that you could create the background with. And Michael,
He loved adding trees.
He is a guy who always loves to tinker with things.
Well, he is an impeccable artist.
Yeah.
His artwork is, glorious.
And he would just, he's like, let's put another tree in the background here.
And then it would crash.
And the
whole
computer
system.
Adam would be, I
Yeah.
don't know. It's like, it's one tree.
What could one tree do? It actually was a Seussian story. If you really break that down, what could one tree do?
And in that case,
the whole forest
we would be
crashes.
down for 30 minutes while they rebooted
30 minutes, huh?
No, I'm optimistic.
Yeah. But no, I remember early on, there was a conversation with David. He wanted the little cats to sort of act as a Greek chorus. And he was talking about getting other vocalists to have them sing. So that all of their stuff, all the little cat Greek chorus stuff.
Oh, wasn't he talking about the Roaches?
The Roaches, that's who it was. I couldn't remember who it was. The Roach sisters. To sing, to have be the singing voices of the little cats and have them sort of pop up in all these different ways. And then I remember there was a huge discussion about whether all of the shows should rhyme. Whether just it should only be the Cat in the Hat who rhymed, whether it should be all of the characters who rhyme, whether that would happen sometimes or all of the time. And, a lot of people had really strong feelings about it because
and the fact of the matter is that, Michael would always remind us that Ted Geisel wrote 40 books in 40 years.
Right.
And we were trying to do 20 episodes in 6 months or 8 months. Or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a common misconception of children's television and any work for a young audience is that it's easier, and it's not.
And I think where we, with the exception of some stories, we basically rhymed when we felt it was necessary.
Yeah. I think that the story was a really big driver of that first season. And I think that was the one thing about your retrospective that I really appreciated your noticing was the attention to storytelling in that first season.
And the first season also was important to note we were writing a show for 8:00 at Sunday nights.
It was nice to write something that was going to be aimed at families and not just, I think this was at a time, I think the hardcore segmenting was just starting to happen in the children's television world. Like the concept of children's television had not been divided into subdivisions of preschool television and children's television. Like you didn't have what you have today, where you have the 2 to 4s and the 5 to 7s and the 7 to 8s. I think this show was aimed at 5 to 10.
They were shooting for 8-year-olds was the
right,
sweet
but
spot.
they were saying it could appeal to 5 to that's 5 to 10 is huge. And then they wanted, it to be a family thing. They don't do that anymore. They definitely don't.
They have a channel for everything now.
Yeah,
exactly.
We were doing a show that the 8-year-olds were enjoying.
Yeah.
And we went to do a focus group.
Oh, Craig's focus group story.
And
it was the first time Craig was ever privy to a focus group.
We went up to someplace in White Plains and we watched the kids be shown an episode. And
you were behind the glass.
We were behind the glass watching. And the kids, it was fascinating.
How old were those kids?
They were mostly 7 and 8.
Mm-hmm.
And they all really enjoyed it. The boys would look away when there was even a hint of anything romantic happening, because I think we showed them the king's beard and
the princess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there was anything about a princess and a prince getting together, they would sort of look away. But the kids all loved the show. And then the moderator asked, would you tell your friends to watch it? And they all said no. Why? Because this is for little kids.
Yeah.
And these are 7 and 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
And that was a tough thing.
Yeah.
That's when I think they realized that it was going to be mostly a show for Nick Jr. and not a family.
Yeah,
show.
because then when season 2 rolled around, we got all new showrunners, we got all new writers,
and that's when it became essentially
it became a Nick
show.
Jr. show. All the characters changed.
But I do want to point out
characters
that right after they had basically, cleaned house of the writers, right after that, the Writers Guild Award nominations came out.
2 scripts.
No, 3.
Oh, 3?
Out of the
what
5.
Who was the third one?
It was
Belinda's?
No, it was Alan, and it was the Birthday Moose, I think.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
Out of the 5 nominated scripts for Best Children's Script, 3 of them were from Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
So that
was Zubbelwomp,
yeah,
Road to Calais, and Birthday Moose.
And, it was Zubbelwomp. That was the first one. Yeah,
yeah,
and that was
that
was the one that won. Yeah. David won. But what was so funny is that was a script that David had spent 6 weeks slaving on.
Yeah. And we had to reshoot some stuff too from
the script that Will Ryan and I were nominated for.
That's right.
That was
you pounded that out
the Road to Calais because
2 days.
I believe we were working on rewriting somebody else's script. And we started it on like a Monday afternoon and finished it on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And it got a nomination. Of course, it didn't win. We would have had to spend. But
it was a really fun. I remember. I mean, it was a dream show for me because it was exactly what I always hoped working for the Muppets would be. I would watch, the Muppet Show when I was in college and just think about like all the character work that people got to do, and I would watch Sesame Street, and just like all this character work. And I mean, because it was the 5 of us. The core puppeteers, Anthony Asbury, Bruce Lanoil, John Kennedy, Kathy Mullen, and myself. And then we would have assistants come in, people to right hand and assist. We had Tim Lagasse. We had little Johnny Tartaglia. John Tartaglia graduated from high school during production of Seuss. Oh my God. I've known Johnny a long time. Because there were so few of us and so many characters, you would have that thing where you would be playing a background character, and then you would run across the studio with your head ducked down and grab another character and go across the set again. And there were shows where, because we were doing computer generation and a lot of blue screening, we would have all these layered shots. Anytime you saw 20 puppets in a frame, and we did that so much, it was so great. It was usually 3 layers of 6 puppeteers.
And it was the first one of the early times when we were using digital tape. So you could do those layers without having any generation degradation.
Right. And you could react to what you saw because we all work off of monitors, so we could see both layers. So you could react to the puppet in the other layer.
Ask.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt, but that was one of my
all.
Specific questions. I was going to ask you specifically. So I know you're monitoring while you're puppeteering, and this has been explained to me by Noel and other puppeteers, and it sounds like the worst thing in the world to try to figure out from someone that doesn't do puppetry. It sounds very confusing when everything's mirrored. But then on top of that, were you seeing the real-time renders of the backgrounds, or did you see a blue screen?
No. Well, no, we saw real-time renders. There were only a couple of times where we wouldn't see, where we would only see a blue screen. But whenever we would do doubling and layering, we would start with the back, obviously. We'd go back to front. So we would do the back layer first, and then we would do the middle layer. And when we're doing the middle layer, you could have your puppet look back at the back row and nod at the person, and then we do the front layer. And so we would just build these layers. And it's the only time where I can look at a show and say, wow, I was doing a main character. I was doing that background character. I was doing 3 characters in this group shot. Like, it was my dream to be able to just do everything. And then I would also assist, I would jump in and right hand in a scene. I mean, it was like, by nature, Muppet performers have to be full utility players at all times. There are very few scenarios where you're not called in to do multiple things. Obviously, Noel on Bear is the exception. Noel was in the Bear. He couldn't often play other characters, except when Bear wasn't in the scene.
I think there were some times where he was holding Tutter. And he could do.
That's true. But you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't right-handing.
No.
So I loved being able to just play so many different characters. And the first season especially, we had such a wide range of types of characters, and just using every character voice in my crayon box.
Within the limitations of the production budget, because that was that called for the invention of the Who's It.
Right, which was it was basically the anything Muppet of the Seuss world. So in Sesame Street, we have the anything Muppets.
Muppets have the Whatnots.
And Muppets have the Whatnots, where you have the basic shape of the head that can be redressed by changing all of the facial features and the wigs and the hats and the costumes to create new characters.
Michael and Ed Eith, who was one of the designers on the show, amazing artist. They created the basic head shapes
for the Who's Its.
Yeah. And they all had that little Seuss pupil with the little...
That's right, the little cutout notch. But also just the shapes of those heads were unique to the Seuss world. They were not the shapes they were not shapes that were used on Sesame Street. They were not shapes that were used in Muppets.
They are used on
so if anybody has ever seen the live puppet improv show Puppet Up, or Stuffed and Unstrung as it was called for a while, a lot of Seuss puppets are used as those puppets because they basically use puppets that weren't being used for anything else. And because the Seuss puppets were so unique in their shape, they couldn't do double duty on anything else. So I've seen Seuss Snoo. I saw Seuss Snoo's head, and
I think we had a budget for every other show to actually create one puppet for every third show, because that's how.
Oh yeah.
We were able to get Morton.
Oh
made,
right.
And some of the birds
had
to be
okay.
built.
Oh, the birthday bird.
Yeah, there was.
But considering you keep talking about the budget limitations, but the more I think about it, we had a lot. I mean, we had Jane and Junior and Horton and the Grinch and Yertle and Thidwick and the Wickersham brothers.
And I think
and the cat and the three little cats.
Was built a few episodes in. He wasn't in it.
No, he was built. There was the Thidwick they used for the press presentation.
Oh, Thidwick. I'm sorry, the Yertle. I'm sorry.
Oh, Yertle may have been done later. Yeah. Well, no, but because I remember Anthony when we were trying to figure out who was going to play who. That was the other thing. We were all cast. The five of us were cast before anybody knew who was going to play what central character. In fact, I remember Raleigh Cruson, who's a longtime Muppet builder, a staggeringly brilliant puppet builder. She was a little frustrated because she assumed that Kathy Mullen was playing Jane Kangaroo. Kathy has much longer arms than I do. So Jane was very long on me, and she's like, I thought Kathy was going to play this character. We sort of did workshops as the puppets were some of the puppets were built before we were cast. If you knew there was so once it was decided, okay, John's going to play Horton and Anthony's going to play Thidwick and Bruce is going to be the cat, and who's going to play, Heather Tidbittle, and who's going to play, Sue Snoo. And I think Norval the fish was built later too.
No, Norval was the one that was built later.
Oh, and Fox and Knox were built pretty early on too. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of the main characters.
Well, when you do a puppet show, when you do any show,
more than any show we do now.
If you want to have puppets built, you sort of have to preload that into your budget.
It is a big upfront cost.
So when they're budgeting the show, when we're making our list of characters or when anybody's, you want to try and make that list as long as possible, because that there's a chance that those are the only puppets you'll be able to have made. Right.
But so it was always fun to see a script come in and see so what combination of Seuss characters and new characters are there going to be? And it was so much fun to get to do something new every week, and to then also have consistency with doing other little characters, to see what I could do with Jane, to see what I could do with Little Cat B. Even though the little cats didn't really have arcs, they sort of developed personalities that the writers, you guys were writing. There were only a couple of scripts that were done. Or was it just the pilot that was done when we started shooting? I don't think there was a stack.
No, I think their King's Beard was in. I think that was the
second one.
I think that was in some semblance of being written.
Yeah. So the writers started writing for the performers to some degree.
And it was fortunate that we had to stop production for the computer stuff because we needed to also stop production to get the writing schedule.
Right.
Up.
But then we would also have, like Craig mentioned earlier, guest puppeteers come in. So, and those were the people who were working on Sesame and
Jerry Nelson.
And Muppets. Jerry Nelson came in, Joey Mazzarino came in.
Barreto.
Bill Barreto is the first time I ever met and worked with Bill. Was on Seuss New, and I was scared to death because I think he was one of the last Muppet performers I hadn't encountered and met, and I knew how brilliant he was. And oh my gosh, he's the most giving performer, just so sweet and lovely to work with. Camille Benara Camporis guested. She was one of the last projects she did before she was sort of retired from puppetry. She played a Sally Spingle Spungle-Sporn, the reporter, and then I wound up playing her in a later episode in season 1 because Camille's like, I'm done. So I got to play a Camille character, which meant a lot to me because I hold Camille in such high regard. Camille, my very first day of working on Sesame Street, Camille was one of the performers that I worked with, and she sort of guided me and took me under her wing a little. But we just had a blast because also we were I don't want to say we were off the radar. We were an important show, but once, with Sesame Street in production and Muppets Tonight in production, we sort of, we like the good arm rods went to Sesame and Muppets Tonight. We couldn't get the good arm rods. And then once we were in season 2 and Bear was in production.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We sort of we were always in last place when it came to resources, which for me is great and I think it's become a hallmark of my work. Avenue Q is the little show that could, and no one had expectations of it, but we were just concerned with just doing a good show. And I think that being it's not like we had low expectations because it was Seuss, but there was just something about being able to do something on our terms. It was just fun. We could really embrace the fun, and we cared a lot about what we were doing, but it felt like because we were just in this tiny little studio, we didn't have a lot of people poking their heads in. It was a fascinating time because we were working these really long, ridiculously long hours. And I guess it was just because I was young and hungry and having so much. I mean, I have fun on every project I do, but there was something about this where it was just like, I'm finally getting what I really want to do. And I feel really good about the work. Wrapping at 11 at night was an early night for us. I mean, 12, 14, 16-hour days were not uncommon on our show. And
sometimes we would be in the writing room late too, because David was always about how
perfection.
Can we make this better.
Yeah.
And, Will Ryan and I, who we wrote several episodes together. And sometimes we would just try and get out of the office because we knew, we needed to get, we ended up doing a lot of writing at the California Pizza Kitchen.
Yes.
Down the block.
But Craig and I, for working together, we didn't see each other as much as one would think because of the writing office being down the street.
If one of my scripts was being done,
you were
on
there.
Set.
So it was like it was working together, but not working together, which was a great way to work together because we weren't. Well, we were working together and seeing each other on a show that had very long hours, but we weren't seeing each other every minute of every hour of every day.
Right.
And we also liked each other, which was nice, and we still do, which is also nice. I'm sure you have other questions that we've not given you a chance to even ask.
No, I mean, I've been sitting here and I've been listening. I mean, I'm fascinated by everything you're saying. I've been crossing off like, yep, you answered that basically. But I do have a one or two specific questions, and just like to do it, kind of just talk about the show in general because it is such an odd show, and maybe I'll just ask the specific question. This is for Craig. So did you write the song? So it's interesting that you were nominated for Road to Clary. because coincidentally, which I did not know before I started researching you specifically for this podcast, that you wrote that show because we use that probably more than any other reference video in the Defunct TV episode.
I noticed that. I'm watching it and I said to Craig, there's your name.
Yeah, because you have a great example of the Cat in the Hat as the trickster god, as I described him, and then you have that song, and that's the question: is you helped write the song "Thank You, Seuss Knew," correct?
Yeah, I think that.
That is the catchiest song I've ever heard in my life. It is still stuck in my head. I don't know what it is.
Wasn't that Joe Carroll and
Joe Carroll, I think, and Peter Tom
at Manic Moose. Peter Tom might have written.
And here's a little thing that Seuss Knew was introduced in an earlier episode.
Yeah.
And she was named.
Who are you, Seuss Knew?
The character's name was because it was a character of Seuss that was new.
Oh.
Seuss Knew.
Yeah.
See? Oh, wow.
See?
Add that to the
Wikipedia
page, audience. Come on, get on that wiki.
Mind blown. Yeah. So, it was basically, the lyrics are fairly ordinary. And I think at that point, Will and I were just, it was like, well, we have to write a thank you song.
Actually, wait, but Thank You, Seuss Knew was sort of a reprise of Who Are You, Seuss Knew from the Who Are You, Seuss Knew episode.
Yeah, we just repurposed it.
So the episode, it was an early episode where Seuss Knew was introduced. So that's the one with all the uncles where she has to figure out who she wants to be when she grows up or she'll have to eat her hat. There's a song, Who Are You, Seuss Knew? Yeah, and so the Thank You, Seuss Knew is actually a variation of the Who Are You, Seuss Knew song, and it's arranged a little differently as well. It's not as
a little dialogue sequence.
Yeah, and it's not as driving and rocking. Yeah. But it's similar, and that must have been Joe and Peter.
Yeah,
doing that.
It's such a catchy song, and that's why I had to ask about it specifically. And it's also because it's in the episode, because I edited it. I didn't edit that episode specifically, but I'm watching the edits and getting back to the editor, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I listened, and so I'm just like, thank you, Seuss. But it's,
I thought you were going to say "We're on Our Way to Calais" was because that's a pretty catchy song too.
On Our Way to Calais was also
a good one.
We wrote that.
Well, those are
Road to Morocco,
right?
Hope and Crosby.
Yeah, those are all the road movies.
We were basically making a road picture,
right?
And
and wasn't that what you and Will just started out? It's like, how do we do a road picture?
Yeah. And we were, the lyrics were just, we started out, we're breaking ourselves up, and
right?
It's like, Susu's an ambassador. This kid has got ambition,
right?
She has a special package to deliver. That's her mission. For those of you who came in late, we call that
exposition. Yeah, there were some really clever lyrics.
That's like, oh, they'll never use that. It's like, hey, we'll use it. But and here's another bit of trivia: the Regina, the Queen of Calais,
yes,
is named after our writer's assistant. One of our writer's assistants was named Regina Calais. She's now Regina Hoffman. In case you're listening, Regina. But we're like, oh, Regina Calais. If she was like let's spell it differently, and that's a Seuss name, Regina, the Queen of Calais. And I think she was mentioned in an earlier episode.
Yeah. Well, and then, talking about real people, the pilot, the Zubbelwump episode, Megan Mullally. David had worked with Megan Mullally.
I think it was her first show, wasn't it? Ellen Burstyn's
something like that. Yeah. This was right before she did How to Succeed on Broadway.
And I think in the Road to Calais, we also have mentions of the other writers' assistants too.
Oh yes,
Marcello
of Picone and Kelly of
Kadula.
Right. But the Megan Mullally thing, it's such a Seussian name. And then this actress, and then this, named after a very real actress with a very Seussian name who went on to become the Megan Mullally. But yeah, like getting to do Max. Kathy did Max in the first episode that Max appeared in. But then when Kathy did Morton, she handed Max off to me. And Max was the first time I ever did a puppet that really didn't speak. And I was worried about my puppetry skills being able to support a character that wasn't speaking a real language. So Seuss single-handedly made me just a better, well-rounded puppeteer all around. I don't think I would be the puppeteer that I am or the performer that I am if I hadn't had that experience. And I have not had an experience quite like that with that amount of work in that small concentrated amount of time ever again. Gotten to do really fun, wonderful things, but to do that kind of prolific 40 characters in 2 seasons or 30 characters in 2 seasons. Like, yeah, I think, well, when I did another Mo Willems' Sheep in the Big City, I think I got to do like 30 characters for him, but it's different. It's voiceover. It's a little different than puppetry. And, there's no assisting and right-handing in animation. But yeah, like I said before, it was as close to the true Muppet experience that I had always sort of hoped and dreamed it would be like. Where I could get to do stuff and not just be a grunt. But I like being a grunt. I'm still a grunt. Still a grunt on Sesame Street once in a while. Well, not once in a while. I'm a grunt. I right hand all the time. It's great. It's great being part of an ensemble.
And I said, there were times we would sit around, we would work. We knew while we were writing the show that if Ted Geisel were alive, odds are he wouldn't really let the show happen.
Oh.
No.
That's true.
And
that's very true.
So
weren't they publishing Daisy Head Maisie around the time we were they found that and I think there was concern about should this locked drawer have been opened?
But I had actually, I think coming back from White Plains, we talked to Herb about the whole thing of why are you putting out so many of these things and why are you licensing out? And to him, he sincerely thought it was about preserving the copyright. And
it wasn't just a line.
I think that's what he thought, even though he was an agent.
Yeah.
And he got 10% of
a lot
of
yes.
thousands and billions of dollars.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was ICM was the agency that represented Dr. Seuss Enterprises. Mm-hmm. And I think that was, I remember getting a fax. We got, this was how old the show was. Mm-hmm. We would, the estate would have to approve the storylines, and they would have to approve the premise or the outline. And then once they did that, the estate had no further notes.
I wonder if that happened in season 2. I have no clue how that worked.
Yeah, and then it was so Nickelodeon would continue to do the notes, but once the estate approved the story,
they stayed out of your hair.
They stayed out of their hair. And I remember we sent Road to Calais off, and I still have the fax somewhere in my files because I kept it. And Herb just wrote on it, "Ted would have liked this one."
Aww.
Oh, that's sweet.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Well, here's what's interesting. I when we knew we were talking to you, I looked in my little Seuss file, and I happened to have the TV Guide review that came out in March of 1998. So it was talking about the second season, obviously, because it was, weekdays at 11 a.m. So it was definitely season 2. And of course, it's titled Flat in the Hat. So, it's not that great.
Oh no.
And it's got the 26 little cats. So, it's season 2. But then they start talking about the humor being more vaudevillian. Example, operator, call me a cab. Okay, you're a cab. That's from season 1. That's from Road to Calais. So I don't know what this guy saw, whether he watched one episode and then like a sizzle reel or multiple episodes, or I honestly don't know.
That's interesting.
He did not love the show.
He did it for the pun. He only reviewed it for that flat in the hat pun.
I
hold
guess.
that up to the microphone so we can see.
That's right. No, and it's really fascinating. And then I also I don't know why I kept them. You have to understand. So when the show came out, we're talking Internet 1.0. So I don't know where you found these. There was an AOL page in 1997, so it's first season, and we happened to find these entries. This show stinks bad. Kezi said in 1997, I hate this show. Take it off the air. Whoever made it should die. Heh, 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 heh. Oh, this show is so boring, says W. Malfeas. I watched it once and puked. You can see the stupid strings. Joke's on you, W. Malfeas. There were no strings.
And also, if you're going to be bored, you usually don't puke. You have to be fairly agitated.
So anyway,
right. I'm so bored like, that I had a very aggressive response.
Right. So like what's fascinating about this is that Dr. Seuss, I hate your dumb show. You smell like fart and you look like a fart head.
Oh, that's the other thing that brings us. One thing we learned at the folks group is that kids thought the Cat in the Hat was Dr. Seuss.
Yes, that's true. Well, you know what? And I think when I was a kid, I thought so too. I think when I was really little, I really associated the Cat in the Hat.
Because otherwise, when you think about it, we have the Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss. We never see Dr. Seuss.
Right.
So why it would make sense he was the Cat in the Hat.
Right. Someone says, I think it is neat, but it gets kind of weird sometimes, like who wears gloves 24 hours a day.
Okay, that's actually a pretty great review.
Yeah.
That's clearly a child, but that's very nice. It's kind of a funny, like, who wears gloves all the time?
Yeah. Now, we did get a good one. Basically my point is, this stuff existed before Twitter. People sucked like long before social media. So this was a fibulous thought by Zeris T-Rex. I'm going to tell you that I love this show. Some people say it should be on Nick Jr. or it's not shown at a good time. Not me. Virtual reality rocks. I'm sure this is a show that Theodore Seuss, whoever, would have made himself. I like puppets. Puppets are cool. And I know how hard it is to paint each strand of hair as if it was a cartoon. I'm so glad that Nick wanted to try something different and new. This show is very different. I watch this show every Sunday. I like it because it is so magical and mysterious. This show is the source of my silliness. I hope you will keep making new episodes in the fall. Thank you, Nick. So
that's nice.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know why I printed those out and kept those, but I'm glad that I did because...
Well, you knew that someday you'd be on a podcast.
I didn't.
Right.
There was no iPod yet to call, to inspire the term podcast.
That's what makes your premonition so special.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was a tangent I didn't expect to go on, but it just goes to like, maybe that was one of the reasons why I was so surprised that people reacted. But like I said, I think with enough time, we grew up in a time when in the early 90s, there was all this nostalgia for the world of Sid and Marty Krofft. And then they came out on video and you realized, wow, this is really bad. But I love it because I remember it from when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So, that's the way it goes. Is that something that makes you feel things or is just the familiarity of something? That's what nostalgia is all about. I suspect there has always been nostalgia. I just don't know how far back it goes and what for. Like when I back when I had my now defunct blog, I remember musing on when movable type came in. Were people nostalgic for the time of having to write everything out? Type. Yes. I miss writing scrolls over and over again.
Where's my papyrus?
That's exactly right. So,
only the hipster guys that were.
But what I
chisel.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really, really enjoyed this. I'm sure everyone's really going to enjoy hearing more about Wubbulous and about just puppetry in general. So just thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
Anytime.
And to everyone listening, thank you for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And thank you for visiting Defunctland.